Hello, hello, everybody, to both the audio and video version of the Naked and Unashamed live podcast with me, your host, Lucy Rowett. So, here is another interview I'm doing with an amazing friend, colleague, mentor, former mentor, all around lovely person, Tamu Thomas. And we're going to be talking today because a lot of our work overlaps. We're going to be talking about type A women in life, business, and sex.
Mhm.
And often what happens when Tamu and I talk, and when I talk with many people, it turns into I don't know, how would we call it?
A wide-ranging exploration.
A wide-ranging exploration. So I hope you enjoy. But before we begin, Tamu, please introduce yourself. Tell us about who you are, what you do, who you help, anything interesting that you want to add.
Oh gosh, interesting. Now that feels like pressure.
Of
Okay,
course.
hello everybody. Lucy, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. And congratulations on your podcast, BTW.
Oh,
So my name is
TY.
Tam. Say that again.
TY. Thank you.
Been like down with the kids.
I'm so cool.
My daughter would so cringe hearing that. But any road, my name is Tamu Thomas, and I am a lover of life. I enjoy being playful, joyful. I get misty eyed looking at sunsets. I'd love to say I get misty eyed looking at sunrises, but I'm not usually up for sunrises. I enjoy having fun. I believe that life is a real gift.
Mm.
And when I remember, I treat it as such. Unfortunately, I often forget, so I have to remind myself all the time.
Mm.
And in the professional sphere, why I'm here is because I am a coach and I work with socially conscious, values driven women in business, helping them create work that is impactful, so it has a good impact on people, so they can create a business that creates good money, so they can live a good life. A
Mm.
lot of the people I work with, their work is a real passion, a real calling. It's very much a mission,
Mm.
and they often then underprice themselves, downplay how wonderful their work is. And I want these women to be able to create work that works for them and remunerates them beautifully,
Mm.
because the work they do literally changes people's worlds and changes the world. And I want them to put some respect on that, to be quite
Mm.
honest, and in a way that honors and respects their nervous systems.
Mm. One of the reasons that when we've known each other for a few years, and yeah, I speak nervous system. I love talking nervous system, and one of the reasons I wanted to connect, other than I love you, is that our kind of the women that we work with, and for me, the women and people evolvers that we work with are very, very similar. And
Mm-hmm.
also for me personally, having been in your group programs, because maybe I'm also an over functioning woman, perhaps.
Overfunctioning high achievers is like a
Recovering, I'm what was it, you could say type A personality, even though I know that that term can be outdated depending. But I was a gifted child. I think giftedness is in one of my neurotypes, and I also have
Mm.
ADHD just like you do. And it's in the work that we do, and I mean both you and I and the collective we as practitioners, coaches, whatever,
Mhm.
we tend to attract the clients that are similar or with a similar traits, let's put it that way.
Mhm.
And I also love working with the overfunctioning type A women, the women that are very, very stuck in their heads, who may have been really successful in their life, in their career, or in their business, generally very, very clever, maybe. But when it comes to sex, intimacy, pleasure, it just feels like there's nothing happening. And I wanted to explore in this podcast kind of the crossovers there, because I know you're very open talking about sex and sexuality. And I remember you were saying in what's it, one of the landing pages for one of your previous group programs, it was like talking about wanking openly. And for some
Yeah.
women, that can still bring up a lot of strong emotions.
Yeah.
So, like, what traits do you see in the kind of over functioning type A women that you work with?
Well, first of all, like when I think about type A, like in my mind, I say type anxiety.
Oh,
So these women are very much driven by anxiety, whether they realize it or not.
yeah.
And because they have a huge capacity and they can go way over their bandwidth and maintain that for a considerable period of time,
Mm.
mainly because they're rewarded for it,
Yeah.
whether that's financially, with accolades, praise, oh my goodness, I can rely on that person. These people have a I am these people. So I'm not talking about these people over there. We
We
have
are.
a tendency to be so in our thinking, our cognitive thinking, that we are then numb to what's going on in our body.
Mm.
And just because we're numb to what's going on in our body doesn't mean there isn't a whole load of stuff going on in there.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of freeze. So freeze, I did a course with Deb Dana, and people often talk about freeze as a blended state, and she also invited us to consider freeze as a state where we're running between dorsal shutdown and
Mm.
sympathetic fight or flight. So we're constantly running up and down, like bust dorsal, boom, fight or flight, bust dorsal, over and over again. So we expend a lot of energy in that boom and bust cycle. And for us, one of the worst things we can be called is lazy. We can be disorganized because we can
Mm.
function in that. But one of the worst things is for us to be called lazy or
Mm.
consider ourselves to be unproductive.
Mm.
We have developed maladaptive coping mechanisms that enable us to shut off from our bodily experience so we can be in that thinking space. So
Yeah.
in terms of sex becomes we're so outcomes driven. The outcome is connection and an orgasm. So we're working for this connection and the orgasm,
Mm.
but because we're cut off from our bodily experience, I'm well, I don't have much opportunity for practice these days, but I have got better working with my breath. But
Mm.
the tendency is for women with that kind of profile, with our kind of profiling, is that it's very difficult to have the level of connection you want to have because you're all up in your head and you might have remembered what meeting you forgot to do the presentation for and whatever else. And then when we feel the orgasm on the horizon, we're so focused on getting to that goal,
Mm.
we then desensitize ourselves because we've made it a project. And simultaneously, we have issues with actually being able to receive
Mm.
and savor pleasure. It's almost like we feel like we might explode because
Mm.
we're not used to it. We're desensitized from it. So, whilst we're chasing the goal of the orgasm, we're frightened of the goal of the orgasm. So, we clamp down and shut ourselves off. So, even if we are climaxing, we're not climaxing to the extent we could because we've overthought it. We've type A'd our way out of
Yeah.
it.
You've just described pretty much to a T the women and femmes that I work really well with. And if you're listening to this and going, oh my God, Tamu, get out of my bedroom now. Ha, we see you. But also in terms of if you're listening to this and you're going, oh my God, that's me. Remember that this isn't just you. This is a pattern. And, in the work that I do, because sex is a big, bad, scary, taboo topic, the most common, I don't know, issue that I hear, it's not necessarily about orgasms or libido or anything like that. Often underneath it, it's, am I normal? Or on the flip side, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Because often the women and femmes that I work with, it's very rare that they have a friend or a friendship group or someone they can talk about sex with. And maybe if they're lucky, they've got some friends, but then they feel this envious, oh my God, my friends are having these multiple orgasms and talking about how amazing sex is. Why doesn't it feel that good for me? Like what's wrong with me? I know I should be experiencing more. Why is there a gap there? And it's like I often say in client sessions and whatever capacity I have where I'm interacting with humans, it's literally I hear this over and over and over again. And this is why I personally love leading groups, whether it's group programs, workshops, because it's like I just want you to listen to
Yeah.
each other and hear. Sometimes the most therapeutic healing thing can be just hearing somebody else's story. And that is both within business, but especially within the realms of sex and intimacy, because you have the double taboo of we don't talk about it. We can't
Yeah.
talk about it. And I use this analogy of like, well, first of all, we're told that sex, no, there's a very famous sex therapist who I really respect called Dr. Marty Klein. And he says the kind of overall message that most of us receive around sex, he's particularly talking about in America, but I think it applies to most countries, is sex, I'm paraphrasing, can never remember the exact quote. Sex is bad, dirty, scary, and disgusting. Save it for someone you love.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes.
His work is amazing. He's a very awesome therapist. And so we internalize that. And it's interesting, as you were saying that, I had my follow-up question, but now I'm going to change it because I want to kind of riff on conditioning that
Mm-hmm.
women and those socialized as women receive.
Mm-hmm.
And also add in the other intersections, different cultures, different
Mm-hmm.
ethnicities. Let's riff about that because that has a big
Yeah.
impact on the type anxiety.
Yeah. So I have a workshop. I haven't done it for a little while, but it's called The Potent Power of Pleasure.
Mm.
My thing is that pleasure, we have the gut brain axis, I think, for women and people socialized as girls. We have a pleasure power axis. Pleasured women are powerful women. And because that we grow up in a society that is underpinned, overarched by patriarchy,
Mm.
we grow up in environments that say our like we conflate sensuality and sexuality,
Yeah.
and we are taught that we give that away. It's for men. So even if you
Mm-hmm.
think about, I went to see Oloni doing a
Oh,
sex and relationships talk. I went with my mum and my daughter,
oh
and
my,
it was
oopsie.
great for us.
I was
It
trying
was
to clap
great
and
for
I
us.
nearly whacked over my
Whack
mic.
the microphone over. It was great for us all. And Aloni talked about it like we're conditioned to give ourselves away. So he took my virginity,
Mm-hmm.
And she refers to it as a sexual debut,
Yeah, I refer to it
Um,
like that.
yeah, so it's just like, so we're conditioned to believe that our sensuality, our sexuality is to be given away.
Mm-hmm.
How many times are we boys won't like it if you do like that, men don't like those kind of things, as if our entire being should be organized around
Mm-hmm.
impressing, luring, seducing, being appealing to the male gaze.
Yeah.
So we are taught from a very, very young age that our sensuality, our pleasure is not ours. It's to be given away. And it's to be given away overtly, but not too overtly. And then we're supposed to be demure, but then raging beasts in the bedroom. And
Yeah.
lots of hip hop songs talk about being a lady in the street, but a freak in the sheets. So
Yes.
that kind of stuff. So we have these very confusing messaging. I remember in school, a friend of mine had sex with a boy, and then it became big hoo-ha. She was a slut, she was a slag because she was good at sex, which meant she obviously was a slut. So we have lots of confusing messaging. And we live in a society where womanhood has been placed adjacent to martyrdom.
Mm-hmm.
So everything about womanhood is about giving away. It's
Mm-hmm.
about being selfless. Just listen to that, selfless. It's about giving away. And when you're not giving yourself away, then you're a bitch. You're selfish. You don't think about other people. You think you're all that. You think the world revolves around you and all of those kind of narratives. So we are conditioned not to even create an intimate relationship with pleasure. We're conditioned not even to have needs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about intergenerational patterns and what we inherit from our bloodline, our mums were probably not having these wonderful sexual experiences or experiences where they were allowed, they had enough space to form an intimate relationship with themselves, to know what they like, what they don't like, what they enjoy, etc. Our grandmothers probably weren't either. So it's been handed down.
Yeah.
And we're now in a situation where we live in a society that expects us to have immediate answers, but actually we're in the midst of our own renaissance. We're in the midst of our own exploration, and we need to have space. Yes, that was a Beyonce reference.
I knew it. I knew it.
We need time to play and explore. What does pleasure mean to us now?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I see things about pleasure and it's always a woman who's frolicking in nature. She's half naked. She's got a daisy chain in her hair. She's flowing with the wind. Most of us aren't living those lives. How do we bring pleasure into the way we live right now? How do we build pleasure in and having time to be sensitized to our bodies in our everyday experience now?
I feel like you're basically just parroting what I say, Tamu.
Basically, well,
It's
we
the
should
same
one day
thing.
we should just stop messing around and do a program together.
Basically, yeah, because that's
Yeah.
exactly. Hopefully, if any, if people, if you have been listening and following me for a while, that's pretty much exactly what I say. So now that somebody else is saying it, hopefully it will start to trickle down, because we often need to hear this shit again and again and again and again and again. It's never just a one-stop shop, because conditioning and like something. So one of my favorite things that I did in my own sexological training, and I do with my clients, is I get them to go through their sexual history. And the intake form that I do, and I also had to do myself, I mean, when I do it with clients, it doesn't have to be as in depth, but what I did was like writing out my sexual history. And that doesn't just mean when I started having sex, aka when a penis entered me, but my first awareness of sex, my
Yeah.
first awareness of my body, the first time I heard about masturbation, what messages I received about masturbation growing up, what messages I received around vulvas, vaginas, penises, breasts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, really eye-opening. And then also we did it in an in-person residential retreat where we did it in groups and we talked about it. And every time you do it, new memories come up. But whenever I've done it with clients, most of them have said, oh my God, I've never thought about it like this. And I say, well, so this is part of the process before we even start, because I really want them to realize everything that you are experiencing is completely logical. If you think about it, it makes complete
Mm-hmm.
sense. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I'm now talking like Ray Dodd, but there we go.
Shout out Ray.
Outright, it makes complete sense when you think about everything that you learned, both explicitly and implicitly. Because for many people, many women that I've worked with, they say I never learned anything. I was
Mm-hmm.
taught, my mum never taught me anything. It was always the silent treatment. And also, like going back to what you said when you went to, I think it was seeing Oloni. I remember before the pandemic, I think she's called Jeanette Davis. God, my memory is so bad, but she founded this sex positive membership called Scarlet Ladies. I think it's changed to Sondra and Beam. But I still remember one of the talks she gave, and I always quote it. And it's like, girls and women, we are socialized to only think about sex within the context of a relationship. And when I heard that, it's like, whoa, mind blown.
Yeah.
Like, I do a lot of media work now, love working for the media. I know I do a lot of
Media darling, you are.
love the media. But, when we think about women's magazines 15, 20 years ago, times have changed. And
Yeah.
back then it was very much, how to top 10 ways to give a great blowjob, how to get a boy to ask you out, how to not let him dump you or something like that, how to
Mm-hmm.
please your man in bed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great, but very little to do with what about yourself. And with the women that you work with and the work that I do, it's often this: people are searching for external answers. How can I just spice up my marriage? Or how can I make sex stop hurting? How can I actually want to have sex? Or how can I basically earn good money and not feel like crap and not
Mm-hmm.
burn myself out? And often the one of the root of the tree, it's the what about yourself and your body and your nervous system and how
Mm-hmm.
you feel in your body, where
Mm-hmm.
when you've spent your life on autopilot, which is not a bad thing, you are not wrong for having done that, you've had to, it makes complete sense that you feel very numb in your body.
Yeah.
And the idea of pleasure is like,
Yeah.
because also like this is like a common, trying not to knock this, so it's a critique of like a lot of messaging around tantra and sacred sexuality, where you have a lot of teachers and practitioners who a lot of their kind of visual marketing is kind of, in Bali, in Australia, rolling
With
around.
some kind of fruit with dripping with honey or something.
Yeah, and like I'm trying not to like sound like I'm shading that. I'd love to go to Bali.
Listen, Bali is a great place. I just want to interject, right? Something I come across over and over again. So I'm Gen X or Zennial, 46 I am. Something that is common with people in my age bracket thinking about sex is to be given away.
Mm.
We are women, people that were socialized as girls, have especially in my generation and above, have invariably been brought up caretaking men.
Oh.
So we end up in relationships. Well, I don't because I cannot tolerate it.
Mm.
But relationships are, you treat your man like your son.
Hmm.
Every once in a while, he stamps his authority and says, this is what we're doing. So, in essence, you're having sex with a teenager that every once in a while kicks
Yes.
off and has a tantrum. And then there becomes a pattern. I'm not really enjoying, like, I work with women who have never really truly enjoyed the
Mm.
sex in their relationship.
Mm.
And then sex becomes caretaking. It becomes a duty. Oh, I'll mellow him out. I'll give him a blowjob, mellow him out. We'll just have sex. Like, and they're not really wanting to.
Yeah.
Their body is saying, no, I don't want to.
Mm.
And they have developed the skill of shutting off to please their man. And the man's not giving consideration, really, because he's never had to,
Mm.
about what gives her pleasure. And because she hasn't, or they haven't had the experience and the practice at being able to state their needs full stop,
Mm.
they have a huge amount of guilt about making the man feel bad
Mm.
by saying, actually, this is what really turns me on.
Mm.
Because part of that caretaking is also caretaking their ego.
Mm.
So the people pleasing codependent pattern becomes so preoccupied with that, we are conditioned to, it's okay for us to feel bad. It's not okay for us to look bad or do things that quote unquote make other people feel bad.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you are able to articulate and show your partner what you like, and they can experience the difference in your body, in your sounds, in your movement, in how your energy feels, and energy feels,
Mm-hmm.
your energy feels, because you are truly being pleasured. That technically, please God, should also get their rocks off,
Mm-hmm.
unless their only interest is them getting their rocks off, whether you are being pleasured or not. So it starts with, from a young age, having conversations so that children and young people are able to recognize their needs and are able to articulate their needs without being told they're making a fuss.
Mm.
They're too needy, they're a drama queen, they're a telltale, they're a show off. All of these messages contribute to a nervous system that learns it's not safe for me to state what I need. So I clamp down, I shut up, I perform.
Yeah.
And as adults, especially for high functioning, over functioning, even type A anxiety folks, we end up in a position where sex is about performance as opposed to our experience.
And this is so much what I've heard before, where, the most classic example is women faking orgasms. And, as you're saying this, I'm thinking of a couple of like past clients where I remember one saying, I'm just a really easygoing person, I'm just really chill, go with the flow. And I'm sitting there
Red flag
and
immediately.
I know, and I'm sitting there thinking, hmm. And it's also interesting because I used to think of myself like that. And again, there's all that stuff around being afraid to make a fuss. And like, as you're saying that, it's reminding me of, you then couple that with already pre-existing shame around your body and your sexuality. I say fear. You may not feel, I'm not afraid of my sexuality, but so many women have never looked at their vulvas. Never. Or maybe they've looked at it in the gynecologist, at the gynecologist or wherever. So many women do not feel comfortable being seen naked. So many women don't even want to see, don't even want their partners to see them naked.
Yeah.
So many women feel really icky or uncomfortable about self-pleasuring, wanking, masturbating.
Yeah.
And you have to, one of my former mentor, Dr. Patty Britton, she's always like, sex is a lightning rod topic. The topic of sex and sexuality is its own minefield where we all have our own vulnerabilities and hang-ups and shame. So like you just add that, you dollop that on top of conditioning that women receive. It creates a horrible shitstorm of, generations of women and people with vulvas who do not feel able to speak up because, when clients describe this to me, it's a form of freeze response, and it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And many of them don't even realize. And then when they start to understand that and work a bit more, their nervous systems are like, oh my God. Because often when we start working together, it can be this, what's wrong with me? I'm so silly. Why can't I just speak up? Especially if they're like maybe super confident in the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Like, I'm leading a company. I'm really good at speaking up in
Yeah.
meetings. But when it comes to sex,
Because as well, Lucy, if you think about what it takes to lead a company and do all of that, it's very outward energy. It's
yeah,
very much energy flowing outward. So whilst people who are very good at leadership and they can be dominant in terms of the work they're doing, etc., intimacy. So what I say is, quite often, Type A people, if they hear a voice that says inside themselves, I can't do this, can you help me? Strategy, let's do this. If the inner voice is saying, I'm scared, I'm confused, I don't know how, they don't know what to do with that. So they will shut that up straight away because it feels very vulnerable. So what often happens is the people we have a tendency to work with, they automatically autonomically experience vulnerability as weakness. And because they're freezing so much, a lot of them believe if I let that fall, I am going to drop down so low, I'm never ever going to be able to get back up again. So it's like the princess and the pea. They just keep putting another mattress, and another skill, another certificate, another coaching program, another business service, another retreat to Bali, playing with my vulva, thinking that's going to sort everything out, another whatever it is, another book, another podcast, and the pee's still peeing there. We're still feeling that because we don't want to, we're scared to deal with that really little fragile part of us that often contains that shadow we create that contains most of our light.
When I was talking with interviewing my past client Justine Dean, and she pretty much describes this where she's a coach, and like many of us in the helping sphere, like the shadow of that can be master deflectors. And it's also like when that there's often this big myth that like to have really awesome sex, it means like bedroom gymnastics. It means like, okay, I've got to have like multiple orgasms, I've got to be like swinging from the chandeliers and I'm going to be doing all this stuff. And like that can be awesome. That can be. I want to create a mentality of both and first of all, I say vanilla sex. That is really underrated. But I always say, hang on, I'm going on a tangent here, it's coming up. Whenever I work with clients, and I remember one saying, I just want to have an erotic breakthrough. And part of me is like, it's very difficult to get to that place of multiple orgasms and going into kink and BDSM and doing all this wild stuff when you can't feel in the first place. And
everyone wants to transcend,
yeah,
very few people want to ground.
Exactly. And like again, sometimes swinging from the chandeliers, sometimes multiple orgasms, amazing. But I want us to think of that as like you're going into an ice cream parlor. These are the sprinkles and the whipped cream and the chocolate sauce on top. This is a wonderful extra, But when, one of my
Give
colleagues
me a good pistachio ice cream.
oh,
Just listen, right? We see this stuff on our society conditions us for intensity. We are intensity junkies. So we think that good sex needs to be multiple positions and talking about that swinging from chandeliers, having these toys and this, that, and the other. When you have a intimate connection with somebody, I'm not talking about the love of your life and all of that is great, but when you have an intimate connection with, and only you can get me in this bloody conversation in the middle of the afternoon, well, no, not only you, but on record, right?
mm-hmm.
I just think sometimes, right, it's a lazy morning in bed.
Mm.
You're talking, you're giggling, whatevering. The next thing you know, a hand here, a hand there, and you engage in sex that doesn't feel like it feels lovely and connecting, but it's not like, oh, what did he do?
Yeah,
It's like a simmer,
yeah.
gently pulsating, gentle movement, gazing, touching, breathing, laughing. And then before you know what's what, that simmer has come to a massive, great big boil. You've only been in missionary.
Yeah.
That shit happens and is real. And that can happen more often than swinging from chandeliers and whatever else.
And this is
And I
also,
think when we're constantly seeking those peak experiences, we dismiss the everyday pleasurable experiences that can be really satisfying.
yeah. And this is again, like I do like this term intensity addiction, even though I'm mindful about using the term addiction because that has a lot of different connotations. That's a whole other thing. But for now, intensity addiction is probably something that people can resonate with, where you're maybe jumping from one crisis to another, or one thing to another, or like in the world of personal development, spirituality, tantra, it looks like people hopping, workshop hopping. And I very nearly fell into this trap. I probably did. And luckily, I think I was in therapy as well. So I was able to kind of ground myself out of it. And this is where people either burn out or they fall into really shitty, unhealthy, predatory dynamics and cults.
Yeah.
Because like I talk a lot about neo tantra and sacred sexuality. I have a very complex relationship with it because it was a big part of my own sexual awakening and liberation. And there's a lot of it that I really find difficult and problematic. And I've had people come to my workshops or clients work with me where they've tried some stuff around tantra and neo tantra, and either they had a really awful experience or it just really put them off. And it's like, this is why I love teaching exercises from it, because it's like we can get the sex part without necessarily having to go down a whole spiritual path that has stuff that can go wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Because a lot
again,
of it is about spiritual bypassing as opposed to embodied spirituality.
yeah, and it's like you don't need to be rolling around on a beach in Bali with a yoni egg and calling yourself something Sanskrit.
Mm.
I don't, when I'm saying this, I sound very dismissive, and there probably is an element of dismissiveness there because it's like that's not available to most people. And you don't,
And also, Lucy, it's not real.
it's not
And
real.
that is an example of intensity.
Yep.
So intensity can be, as you described in the Tantra world, intensity can also be go big or go home.
Yeah.
Intensity can also be you've got to be all in. Intensity can also be what we call consistency and discipline and all of those sorts of things. So it can be like your example of workshop, program, whatever it is, hopping, because it means if you think about like stone skimming,
Mm-hmm.
when you're hopping, you're just skimming the surface. You're never going to anything at depth. And most of us, we need less of what we're like, less of the doing things and more time in a few things so we can drop down and get the depth. So I often will encourage people when you're doing your program, your learning or whatever, you do one for your brain, one for your heart, one for your gut. And now I'll be honest, I've got ADHD and I'm a manifesting generator and I'm who I am. but it's also about being discerning. You don't have to do everything like that. There are some things, like once I got introduced to the autonomic nervous system in particular and the vagus nerve, obsessed. I've done courses over and over and over again because I learned something new, or I get it from a different different perspective, or I've got a new experience to bring to that. So it's about allowing yourself to go to the depth. And when you are a type personality who is about go, 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 the stillness and the gentleness and the grace that's required for that type of work can feel terrifying, because you're being asked to slow down in a world where not only are you accustomed to speeding up, you have received great reward for your efficiency, for your expeditious abilities.
Yep. It's, as you're saying this, I've just got this image, this mental image of when people try an orgasm. It's like, I led this orgasm workshop for the Vienna Porn Film Festival, shout out. And I love teaching it because a very common thing when people are masturbating is, whether you're using a toy or just your fingers, is to ram down the vibrator really hard. Clench your body, hold your breath, and hard to come. And maybe you need to look at porn that is more and more intense. Maybe you're somebody where you need really intense things in order to have that orgasm. And then often the orgasm that you have will feel a bit like, I don't know, pulling blood from a stone. Or it will feel like a sneeze. It will feel really depleting and it's super hard to get. And so I'm always saying, actually, you're going to experience more. You're going to have more of an orgasm by lightening, by taking a breath. I'm not against vibrators. There's often a lot of stuff around that vibrators are addictive and dangerous. No, vibrators are great, but lighten that touch. Use your fingers, switch it up, use your breath. And in order to have an orgasm, you need to stop trying to have an orgasm. And that in itself is the whole thing of slowing down, learning how to feel your body. That can bring up a lot.
Absolutely.
It can be vulnerable. And it's funny when you're saying vulnerability, it's like, yeah, sex is vulnerable. You are literally naked, usually, but at least you're exposing your genitals. How more vulnerable can you get?
And a person with a vagina, like, remember, we've got to let someone in.
It's a very
So the
different
way,
experience.
and when you think about sex, as a person with a vagina, your body is open in a way that a person with a penis's body isn't.
Yeah.
They see you in ways you don't even see yourself. They see, nooks, crannies, holes that you don't get to see yourself ordinarily.
Yeah.
So it is very vulnerable. And with that, a lot of my work talks about neuroception of safety, like feeling safe inside your body. So many of us, the way we live, even to meet deadlines for work, we're quite often going against our body. Setting deadlines and the way we work is often a sign of danger for us. The way we're like, got to get their done, I've got to do this kind of work. So we have been conditioned to cut ourselves off and dismiss and not understand what helps us to feel a sense of safety. So we're also entering into sexual encounters, having sex. And I'm not talking about consent. I'm talking about we're present, we know what we're doing, we're giving consent with our minds, but we're not able to give consent with our bodies because we're so used to shutting down our bodies so that the body can do what our top of mind wants us to do. Yeah. And when you're having sex and you're experiencing orgasm is so much more potent when you are open. So if you want to experiment, and if you can, and I'm not talking about like exhale with like with vigor, but an orgasm on your exhale, an exhale supports an orgasm because it's signaling to your, especially a long exhale, you're signaling to your parasympathetic system, you're safe, it comes online, it enables you to open up much more. So understanding the rhythms of your body and how you can support yourself to experience safety in your body also supports not just, and sometimes the orgasm isn't there, sometimes the orgasm isn't anywhere to be seen, but you can still have a damn good experience. But it's about cultivating a safe relationship with yourself, because quite often our bodies do not experience us as a safe person because we're constantly exposing ourselves to what feels like potential danger.
And it's but so many tangents there. Oh, what's it? When you orgasm, exhale, and if you can, make a sound.
Mm.
And it can literally be a sound of pleasure.
Literally.
Literally, because also that works with the throat. There is
Mm-hmm.
there's a big link between the throat and the vagina, and the throat and the pelvic floor. Also making sounds. Can't remember what that does on a nervous system level, something about the vagus nerve.
Yeah.
Generally, it helps.
It's stimulating the vagus nerve, and
Yeah.
it's like a direct route to apparently the vagus nerve ends in your sexual regions. So if you're
It's supposed to end in the what was known as a G spot, the periurethral sponge.
okay, there we go.
I think so.
So like that, especially if it's like really bassy, like,
I got
and
tummy
it's like,
making sex sounds now.
sex is a primal act. Stop trying to be demure, like be
Oh,
wild.
and that's the whole thing, and also as you're saying this, one of my ideas of some point is to run either a week long challenge around self-pleasuring, because there is a whole practice called orgasmic yoga created by Dr. Joseph Kramer.
Wanking week.
Wank week. Did you know that the whole of May is known as masturbation month?
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a whole history behind that. We don't have time to go into that, but it's known as
Okay.
masturbation month. But I'll send you the link to that.
We won't do ADHD tangents. We
Yeah,
won't. We won't.
yeah. But Dr. or Joseph Kramer, so he created orgasmic yoga as a practice that involved things from qigong. Oh gosh, other things. I'm not selling it very well. But the point is, orgasmic yoga is meant to be a practice where you do it every day for 30 days, a 30-minute self-pleasuring practice. And the point is not to come, it's to track the sensations. So it's a 30-minute wank every day. But the goal, and there are different actual exercises. So each day has a different prompt, so different sounds, different physical exercises. That's why it's called orgasmic yoga. There are physical exercises like body shaking, like stretching, different ways of touching and massaging your cock or your vulva. It's a whole thing. And the whole point is that if you come, great. But the point is that you're meant to track the sensations. And many of us don't. And I love explaining the sexual response cycle to people because it's like, oh my God, it's an actual thing. And then I set wanking homework, which is start to track your sexual response cycle, because knowledge is power. But, Joseph Kramer, he created something called somatic sexology or sexological bodywork, which is a whole thing. But I love it. It's that mindful wanking, wanking is a spiritual practice, because it really can be. And he created it partly because he was trained to be a Jesuit priest, and part of that was that no masturbating, no nothing. And so he decided the night before he was ordained to take himself to heaven. And literally, and he created it also because often when we masturbate, we tend to fantasize. Nothing wrong with fantasizing. The point of orgasmic yoga is to bring your experience entirely to yourself and work with your own pleasure, work with your own erotic energy. So it's also really awesome practice if you're somebody of faith, because it's about your body, your own energy. You're not thinking about anybody else, and particularly for women, you're not putting it on anybody else. You're not giving him your orgasm. This is all about you. Love orgasmic yoga. Anyway, so we have run over time as expected.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise. I have a final question, and that's, what do you feel is the impact of pleasure on overworking or overfunctioning, life and business, career success?
Well, as I said, whenever it was earlier on in our conversation, you know, women and people with a clitoris, the penis is multi-purpose. The clitoris is an organ dedicated to pleasure, devoted to pleasure. I first heard this from my friend Sally Beaton. She's on Instagram as Women with Sparkle. We have that for a reason. It's not like what is that one? What's that part of the body that always explodes on people? Oh gosh, my mind's just gone blank. Appendix. It's not like the appendix that we don't need anymore,
Yeah.
right? We still need our clitoris. thousands, 8,000 odd nerve endings. I'm just looking over here because somebody gave me this.
It's actually more than 8,000 now. Yeah. Oh, you've got.
So how, like this, we think about the clitoris as this here, but we've got all of this, right? All of these, this full of
I
nerve
can't believe
endings.
you've got a clit. Isn't
Yeah,
like a 3D printed clit. I know you have a real life clit, but
yeah, 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 yeah. And this, look at all of that
Mm.
dedicated to pleasure.
Mm.
It's not just, when we feel anywhere that like we can achieve pleasure, it shows how important pleasure is for us.
Mm.
People, women and people socialized as girls, our relationship with oxytocin is different to that of men and people socialized as boys. Like we have a chemical need
Mm.
for pleasure.
Yeah.
When we are pleasured, like pleasure is a huge nervous system sign of safety.
Mm-hmm.
When we feel safe, people often think about safety as I'm protected from all of this stuff. No, safety is like the landing place for courage. It enables us to take the risk of living
Mm-hmm.
and going for what we want. It enables us to be risk aware rather than risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're pleasured and we know how to pleasure ourselves and we're feeling safe, we can then say, honey, I was doing that. I want to show you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're then sharing that intelligence, that deep, reverent, embodied intelligence with somebody. The thing is about that, when we share intimately like that with our people, if they are unable to meet us where we are and respond, and I think that this is an unconscious reason why lots of women don't want to take this risk, if we are showing our partner how they can pleasure us and our partner rejects that, we have to face the fact that our partner doesn't think that we and our pleasure are important.
Mm.
And then we are left with whether or not we're going to put up and shut up and stay there, whether or not we're going to do the work of being able to support change in that partner, or whether we have to call it a day.
That
And the
is a
sad
scary
truth is,
decision.
exactly, it's a very hard, and because of the sad truth is, because of how we've been conditioned, there are many women and people socialized as girls who have got practice at tolerating a substandard relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and they will opt for that and deny themselves pleasure.
Yeah. And it's interesting because whenever I say the word pleasure, people often go to sexual pleasure. And actually learning to experience
Lucy, I can just do this and experience pleasure. I can slowly eat a good, I'm not fancy like that. I don't need fancy chocolate. Give me a good Cadbury's whole nut, eating that slowly, the different textures, letting that chocolate melt in my mouth, feeling it trickle down. That can be a pleasurable sensual experience. Moisturizing my hands slowly and allowing my fingers to slowly, like the in between there just feels so damn pleasurable.
I have a really awesome guided touch exercise I lead my clients through. Part of it was created by Dr. Betty Dodson, not Betty Dodson, Betty Martin. That's the one. Wheel of Consent. Um, what was I going to say? Because it's very difficult to feel sexual pleasure if you find it hard to pay attention to pleasure in the rest of your
Yeah.
life. Pleasure in every other way. I've got
Yeah.
my jasmine oil. I like to use this as a bump. No, it's just I'm very scent oriented. So this is a little pleasure boost for me. Although I do want to say, like, so I was taught and I learned that the clitoris is the only organ for pleasure, and it is. But then I learned, what was it, a few months ago, that when the clitoris is, was it pleasured and the clitoris is engorged, it helps with uterine placement. So basically, when we become aroused as women and people evolve as we have, most of our erectile tissue is internal. When we are aroused, which means we get a lady boner, because we get a boner just like men do, but it's internal. It basically helps position the uterus, which is more conducive to conception. So technically, there is a kind of use for clitorises, but it.
A clitoris does not expel waste.
A clitoris does not expel waste. No. And also, it's like pleasure for the sake of pleasure for a lot of people is still a lot to get their heads around.
Yeah.
So it's something for you, as in the listeners, watchers, to chew over. All of us.
Yeah.
So, Tamu, how can people find you, and what thing would you like to shamelessly brag about? Because I love shameless bragging.
Shameless bragging. So you can come and find me. You can come and find me on Instagram. That tends to be my playground. And what do I want to shamelessly brag about? I'm going to be shameless. I'm going to be super shameless and audacious. Two things. First thing, I have
Two.
a book coming out on the 5th of March. It's called Women Who Work Too Much, Break Free from Toxic Productivity and Find Your Joy. That is available for pre-order now. As a new author, a debut author, pre-orders are very important. So if anything you've listened to today tickles your fancy, please do check out my book. It's available wherever you can buy books. And the other thing I would like to root to toot the horn of is my lovely new membership group, the Life and Business Sanctuary. It is a place for values driven women in business to come and learn what they need to learn, and most importantly, take the action they need to take to create a strong foundation for their lives and businesses.
You'll find me in there too. And I will shamelessly brag, plug. So hang on, come on, brain. At the moment, I am in the process of cooking up a new group experience for you wonderful listeners, for everybody. In the meantime, if you just can't wait and you really want to get bespoke, individualized support, we can either explore working together one-to-one for 6 months. I'll put the links in the show notes. And I have this really new offer called Empower Eros Session. So this is for you if you want to, when I say dip your toes in, you want to get started with exploring your pleasure, exploring your orgasms. You're not sure if you're ready to commit to 6 months or a group program yet. It's where we do 2 sessions over the course of a month with WhatsApp and email support in between, where you can really go in depth. It's bespoke support to you. So we can work on or explore orgasms, your libido, painful sex. I say rekindling the desire in your relationship or marriage, but do know that when we talk about that, we're going to be rekindling the desire for you. It can be unnumbing your body, learning how to feel pleasure in your vulva again. All sessions will be on Zoom, and they're talk only, but we will be doing exercises like body shaking, pelvic movements. I'll be giving you homework. If this feels good to you, the link will be in the show notes, or drop me a DM and we can book a call.
Yum.
Yum. Well, Tammy, it's been an absolute delight. We've gone way over time as planned.
Well, when you were saying, I just thought, let's see.
We aimed for half an hour, didn't make
Yeah.
half an hour. Anyway,
Bonus.
bonus, whatever. Anyway, it's been a delight, and
Thank you so
bye.
much.